At this point, I'm going to give everything I have on the synoptic references in Justin Martyr. For the most part, things went exceptionally well. However, I did manage to find 2 new things, and every time I find something new, good things seem to happen. I began with dialogue with Trypho and extracted all the synoptic quotes. I began cross-referencing the quotes, and everything was lining up with Luke and Marcion. However, within about 30 chapters, I began to run into Matthew exclusive quotes. After another 50 chapters or so of complete Matthew quotes, I finally had to concede the point entirely. There is a strong likelihood that Justin Martyr has the book of Matthew. I began extracting only assumed Mark, Luke, and Marcion quotes. I went back through dialogue with Trypho, his first and second apology, and all fragments of Justin Martyr. The result of this process yielded only one solid problem to my Marcion first hypothesis. Out of maybe 100 quotes, this was a fantastic result, but I still had to explain this single problem. Here's the quote from Justin Martyr's Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 100. Now, in the Synoptic Gospels, this section is exclusively consistent with 2 separate quotes in Luke, Luke 135 and 138. This section was not a part of the Gospel of Marcion. This quote was the only quote in all of Justin's works that was exclusively in Luke, so that one quote could have been a very big problem. On something like this, there are 3 solutions. It could be a later addition, it could be from another work, or Justin Martyr has the Gospel of Luke. My first inclination is always to find out if Luke is verified in other ways. I needed to find something else that would either verify Luke or exclude Luke. First, I needed to find if this quote was consistent with anything else besides Luke. I was aware of the Gospel of James. The Gospel of James is an infancy gospel, and in going through this gospel, the quote is identical. In other words, the Gospel of Luke account and the Gospel of James account are the same. Still, I didn't have James' priority over Luke, and so I had to research that. I found my answer, however, in Justin Martyr's dialogue with Trypho, chapter 78. See, according to the Gospel of James, Jesus was born in a cave. Luke does not say where Jesus was born, though he alludes to the no room at the inn manger story. Oddly, Luke is the only one that even suggests this story. Not even Matthew mentions that story. So this would be one point where we have a clear distinction between all 3 of the infancy accounts. But according to Justin Martyr's dialogue, Jesus was born in a cave. And in going over the rest of Justin's infancy mentions, there is absolutely nothing else consistent with Luke's infancy account. Everything else is consistent with either the book of Matthew or the Gospel of James account. Justin Martyr is not quoting Luke in chapter 100. Justin has the Gospel of James. The Gospel of James is consistent. The Gospel of Luke is not. Along with the strong likelihood that Matthew exists here, I picked up another golden nugget. Justin has the Gospel of James. I went forward to check for Acts and the Gospel of John. There is one quote that seems remotely similar to the Gospel of John. However, neither John nor Acts appears in Justin Martyr. It would take a far leap of the imagination to get a John or Acts quote from his work. It simply is not there. What Justin has with relative certainty is Matthew, Marcion, and the Gospel of James. He also likely has some of the Pauline letters, but on this run, I was not looking for Paul. What Justin does not have is Luke, Acts, or John. He may or may not have Mark, but Mark should have been available by this time. Mark is simply too much like the other synoptic gospels that Mark quotes end up being difficult to find. So on this run, we found some more gems. Justin's account of the birth of Jesus comes from the Gospel of James and is inconsistent with Luke's account. One other fascinating thing that was found here is that Matthew's infancy account appears to be also consistent with the Gospel of James. James may have priority over Matthew as well. So right now, this is where the synoptic Gospels line up. We have no certainty on Matthew or Mark dating. However, Luke is consistent with 169 to 183 and the era of Theophilus of Antioch. The Gospel of James probably had priority over Matthew and definitely has priority over Luke. This is a very big deal, and it should make things much simpler to track. However, the sources before Justin Martyr are simply not strong. I'll have to take into account multiple approaches to try and find more specific solutions.